Hi everyone, and welcome to a very special session of the Dariel conference. Today's session is going to be all about going into the unknown. This is also our first attempt on Zoom, and we hope that you guys enjoy it thoroughly as we have. You'll note that there are a couple of small changes, notably that you have a dedicated Q&A section. There is a chat section as well, and you have the option to also ping us and upvote some of your questions and comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us and to hang out during this lunchtime. We are thrilled to have you. Today's talks are going to be great. And I say that unbiasedly, having listened to both of them numerous times. The first session will be from our very own Julian Zeegers on his lived experience as a graduate turned amazing Dariel intermediate. He's going to tell us all about the developer skills that you didn't know you needed going into a software development job. And then after that, we are going to have a little chat from Jeff all about how do you actually know what you know. So before we get started, just a few points. As always, the session is recorded and you can catch all of these on our YouTube channel and on LinkedIn afterwards. You'll also see a little link in the chat section for you to touch base on. So be sure to go and give us a like and let us know what you think. After this session, you will also see that there's a little survey that pops up in your browser. Please take 2 minutes just to give us some feedback on your experience. It really helps us go and build more amazing conferences like this one. So without further ado, welcome to the stage to our very own Julian. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Everybody, if you can see me. My name is Julian Zeegers. Thanks, Anine, for the introduction. I'm a graduate developer, well, I'm an intermediate developer at Dariel, started off as a graduate. And today my presentation is from grads to riches, the required skills they don't tell you about. So just as an introduction, you know, a career is a journey, and some might say this career starts in school and all the way to the end. But for the sake of a catchy title and to save time, I'm going to put the starting point at graduation. So that's when you end university. And this journey I'm going to take you through is going to take you to the industry knowledge I've gained as an intermediate developer. So this is now a metaphor for the riches part of the title, not necessarily my salary. So the tongue-in-cheek saying goes that university prepares you for the interview, which is sort of true in some ways, where you do learn the foundations of all technologies and how to code and all that kind of stuff at university, but it doesn't necessarily prepare you for how it is in the working world. I know with personal experience that the sort of softer skills they neglect to teach you at university. So this presentation is just going to take you through the tricks and the trades that I've learned through my career so far. So just to take you back, so my first day at Dariel was 2017. I was ready for everything, and there was a sort of expectations versus reality. So you can see there's a picture of myself and on my first day, and I was ready to take on anything. I had come freshly out of university with all the sort of Java knowledge and SQL and all that kind of stuff. But I still remember the first day they said, okay, your first project will be an internal JavaScript project. And I got super excited because, you know, having worked with Java at high school, I'm like, cool, I'm going to kill this thing. But my first lesson was Java and JavaScript are quite different. So already expectations were crushed. But I did fine. I managed to upskill in JavaScript. And about 6 months later, I got put on a project that was at a major client of Dariel's, and it was indeed a Java project. So I was like, okay, awesome. I can finally use my Java knowledge that I knew. And I distinctly remember arriving on the first day. I think it was the first stand up, and someone said, okay, cool, welcome, Julian. And, you've got you know some Java, so you can just like jump straight right into it. And in the first stand up, I think the Scrum Master said something on the lines of this: today, once we inject our EJBs to the JBoss container, we can use UCD to promote SRT to UAT. Julian, all we need you to do is fix the DTOs that are breaking the DAOs used by the JSP so that our BA can sign the SRS. I knew nothing. So basically, the point of that story is that coming in as a graduate, not to say that there's no expectations, but basically the expectations are quite low in terms of your technical knowledge that you require. So that brings us through to the first trick of the trade, which I've defined as ask questions, but answer more. So yeah, as I said, like coming in, you're kind of not expected to know everything and anything. And yes, it's really good to ask questions. That advice, I think, is kind of common knowledge. But the thing that I found is that I should have answered more. There were so many times where I sort of knew the answer to a question and I was just too afraid because of what I thought I might get judged if I got the answer wrong. So it took me a while to realize that your job is not a continuous assessment. You don't always have to have the right answers. And by answering and getting it right, you do contribute to the team and the project as a whole. So it's important to make mistakes and ensure that you're in a sort of environment that allows for mistakes. So ensure that your working environment is conducive to learning. And if that's not the case, speak to your team leads, even your project managers, because there might be a fundamental problem with the project if it's not conducive to learning. And even take it up with HR if it gets to that point. But basically, lesson number one is just like, don't be afraid to, really get your teeth stuck into technologies that you might not be familiar with. Number two, the most important meeting of the day is lunch. And so I don't mean this in a nutritional sense, although it is important to eat a healthy diet and to keep fit and healthy. But basically what I mean by this point is that lunch is always the time that you can use to socialize. And although we are currently in a pandemic, and I mean, face-to-face meetings are rare these days, there are still lots of opportunities via Zoom, and I see there's lunch catch-ups that occur, and even like sort of internal, like say development only stand-ups where you get like 15 minutes just to catch up and socialize. And it's a very important part of any project, because having a good team culture and having fun at work ultimately leads to a better outcome for the project. So yes, again, also try and attend as many social events. I remember Dariel was famous for hosting really cool Friday afternoon get-together, which unfortunately can't happen at this time, but I'm sure they will all come back. And like I found attending those events was so helpful just to get to know your fellow colleagues. And like, it's even going back to my first point, it's even a opportunity to learn. So basically, I distinctly remember sitting around the braai and I learned more about how to create a Maven plugin with my seniors around the braai than I did on Stack Overflow. So it can be benefit as well to attend these events. Cool. Going on to number 3. Business thinks you're a tech god, so just roll with it. So again, going back to when I sort of entered the industry, I had no idea what this business entity was and that there was a difference between tech and basically I learned that sort of business. So I guess for the younger ones on the conference that don't know, like business are sort of responsible for giving us what to do, and then tech goes and do it. So forming a good relationship with business is really important. And when I say that they think you're a tech god, like I like even small things like doing simple SQL statements and bringing up like simple SQL reports. I mean, some business people really like enjoy or think like you're amazing, and you add so much value, which it does add value, and never sell yourself short on how much impact you do make. So yeah, it's important to know your worth and also avoid a situation when it's us versus them. I've in a few occasions been involved where it becomes a sort of blame game where business blame tech for not doing it right, and tech goes and blames business for not giving correct requirements. And you should rather work on an environment where you work off each other, and especially I guess in today's age of agile, I guess this whole feedback methodology where you're getting constant feedback does help to avoid such situations. And also remember that you're not only a software developer at Dariel, you're also a consultant. So use your opportunities to consult. And this means like, if you feel that a certain technology is not being utilized properly, or maybe it's the complete wrong technology, like you might suggest like using a NoSQL database is better than a SQL one. Like these types of things do add a lot of value and do add to the service that we offer as software developers. So don't be afraid to give your opinions and consult. So number 4, at the client, you are a small fish in a big pond, but get to know the pond. So often we get placed at clients at Dariel that are really big, like all the major banks and huge organizations. And you might find that you get quite lost in such an organization. So figure out the structure and like, so who's on top? Like it's important to know who the CEO is and the CTO and all the major sort of management. This is important because first of all, when a big exec comes into a meeting, it's always handy to know who they are and what sort of powers they possess. I remember, I think recently I was on a Zoom call, a Teams call, where I think the CTO of the client that we're at currently was on the call and started chatting to me. And I had no idea that he was the CTO. And like, I didn't say anything wrong, so that was good. But I mean, knowing who he was might have been a bit helpful. So, it's important to ensure it does help to know the pond in a sense, and also find people and teams that you trust. So, also a big thing coming into the industry is I didn't realize, like, yes, we are the development team, but like there are whole other teams that need to work together. So there might be like a SQL team and an infrastructure team and a testing team, and you form part of this whole ecosystem. And you might not even interact with these teams on a daily basis. And to have people identify a sort of connection within these teams is very valuable, because you never know when you're going to need them. Again, on personal experience, we've had to deploy something at, I think it was like 2 a.m, and the SQL server went down, and we had to call someone from the SQL team to go and restart the servers at 2 a.m. And I mean, I think if my team lead didn't have a good relationship with that particular SQL manager, it would have made the whole situation much worse. So they do, knowing who and who's involved and all that kind of stuff is very important. So yeah, make sure you get networked within the clients. And then finally, my last tip is that don't be surprised by the odd long day. So coming into, the industry, I kind of was like, okay, cool, university's over. I can now have the 8 to 5 job, and I'll no longer have to sort of, bring your homework home in a sense, which is kind of true in most days. But with the nature of software, and it kind of demands us to work out of business hours sometimes. So it makes sense because the big systems we're building are often used by the end users, like during the daytime, during business hours. So when you want to do deployments and get your stuff released, makes sense that this is going to probably happen after hours or even weekends. So expect that type of thing to happen, but also know that you should be fairly compensated. So in all the teams I've ever been on, yes, we've worked like a long, early hours of the morning or on a weekend, but we were always compensated. So we were given like the odd day off as well, and given a Friday afternoon to go leave early. So make sure you're fairly compensated and not taken advantage of. Understand your value. Understand that you don't have to be worked to the death to provide to get to the deadline. It's important that you should always manage deadlines and expectations so that in a situation where you are working these ridiculous hours. But yeah, as this tip goes, if 1 or 2 odd long days occur, don't be surprised. But yeah, don't be afraid to set your boundaries as well. Like if you are getting taken advantage of, I think we've had a conference on burnout. It's important not to get into a situation where you do feel like you might be heading towards a burnout. And so yeah, to conclude, being a Dariel developer means that you're a software developer plus a consultant. So just ensure that you bring that sort of service to the clients, and hopefully using these tips and more tips that you might gain through your own journeys, through your careers, that you can develop the skills needed to be a very good developer. And remember, you are the whole package. So yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julian. That was awesome. I'd love to know, as someone who's gone through this journey, what language or what skill have you enjoyed learning the most during this time?
So yeah, I guess especially at Dariel, or in software in general, we basically have 2 main languages, which is Java or C#. So as I said in the beginning, I thought I knew Java coming in, but I really didn't. And I guess learning Java like sort of more in depth has definitely been a skill that I've really cherished and have enjoyed learning. But I've also touched on C#, which is also not bad, and a lot of the concepts are really similar. So yeah, those 2 big skills that I've learned.
Awesome. So what's next for you? Just after you've mastered your C# and punished and destroyed all of the Java stuff, what would you like to do next?
I guess I sort of lacking in skills of like cloud computing, and I guess really understanding things like Kubernetes and OpenShift. And I mean, I have a basic knowledge, but delving deeper into that sort of stuff again to sort of add onto that full package that developers at Dariel possess, that we sort of these full stack developers. So I guess that's the next sort of learning area I would like to go into.
That's awesome. And what advice do you have for our new deep graduate engineers?
I guess have fun. Don't take it too seriously at first. Well, yeah, don't get too overwhelmed by jumping in, because it is quite a deep learning curve initially, and I think you could be tempted to really take life too seriously and really not have fun while doing it. So yeah, have a balance.
That's amazing. Thank you so, so much, Julian. All right, everyone, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section and we will also answer them throughout. Without further ado, thank you so much for putting this together, Julian. I'm going to hand over now to Jeff and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the concept of how do you know what you know? Jeff, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, or hello, everyone, wherever you're watching this from. So my name is Geoffrey, as you can maybe hopefully see on the screen. So the topic I'd like to share with you today is how do you know what you know? So this is maybe a little cryptic sounding, but the short version of this is really, why should anyone actually trust your opinion? So before we start, just a little bit about me. So I started at Dariel after graduating at university, and I was studying engineering, and I've been at Dariel for the past 11 years. So I'm in my 12th year at Dariel. This topic came to me over the last couple of years, really after a lot of interactions I've had with a lot of people, and really stems from the idea of helping people develop some of the magic around what people see as really smart developers. So this is basically a rambling of, I suppose, part philosophy on my thoughts of how can you actually develop an awareness of the things you know and where you actually know them from. So to kick off our journey, I'd like to consider a few examples maybe to think about. So maybe have you ever found yourself having been surprised when maybe some bug you fixed actually didn't work? Or maybe you've been in a situation where you found some unused code and you decided that, hey, I'm going to go clean this up, but then you actually went and broke something. So side note, a very good colleague of mine quite some years ago actually broke the Johannesburg Stock Exchange with this little trick here. And maybe you've had a hard time busy reproducing some issue in an environment and you ended up finding out, hey, this is actually something really, really silly. So maybe you've had one of those experiences before and perhaps you've been thinking to yourself, hey, like maybe what's going on here? And it really boils down to something as simple as this. So when we have a false assumption and we act on it, then we can find ourselves in trouble. Okay, so we don't really want to be in this place, but maybe here's another example that may or may not be practical to people here. But let's imagine I were to ask you, let's say you've got an iron deficiency and now you should try and eat some more vegetables to increase iron in your diet. Those of you who may be thinking, say, spinach is a really good example, maybe because of something like Popeye or because you heard it's got a really high iron content, you would actually be wrong. Basically, it's quite complicated, but spinach isn't necessarily the best source of iron in your diet, at least not on its own. So what's important here is that some of you may have been acting on a false assumption and you might not have found yourself actually sorting out your iron deficiency. So the simple solution to this is really quite obvious, and it's you should really be acting on fact rather than opinion. As simple as that sounds, it's actually quite difficult. And this is because it's really hard to act on fact because opinions can seem so similar to facts. So often, maybe you're having an argument with your friend about something and you or your friend believe that their opinion is actually fact. These two things can present to us as the same kind of thing. So the question now is, well, what do we actually do about this? And for me, this is where the question of how do you know what you know becomes relevant. So in other words, what is the source of whatever truth it is that you're busy considering at this point in time? So what are some practical ways of doing this? Well, we're really trying to develop a conscious awareness of, firstly, what things do we know? So let's produce a manifest of things that we know. So that means taking an inventory or building up a list. So if you're working on a piece of code, that is all the facts about the piece of code that you're busy working on at this time. But also, it's very important to have an awareness of, where does this knowledge actually come from? How do you actually know this? So if we come back to the question of how do you know what you know, it means interrogating that second part. A lot of this really boils down to a branch of philosophy known as epistemology. So this definition, borrowed from the Oxford Dictionary by Google, says the theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its methods, validity, and scope, and the distinction between justified belief and opinion. So the philosophy here obviously is, can we ever really know something? But epistemology is about drawing that distinction to say, I really do know something, versus, well, I just kind of think maybe that's what it is. All right, so that's very nice, but how do we actually do this? You might be stuck. So for me, one of the easiest things to do here is actually to run experiments. So some simple ways of doing that at a high level is, we're going to want positive confirmation of our facts, but also it's important to try and find a negative confirmation. So in some ways, this is sort of a bit like a scientific process going on here. So if we cast our mind back to the spinach idea, you have this idea that eating spinach is going to increase your iron levels. So you make a change to your diet, you start eating spinach, and you record your iron levels. And then once you see that, okay, it's nice that my iron levels seem to be going up, you're also going to want to stop eating spinach to make sure that your iron levels stop going up still. So this helps us to make sure that the thing that we think is the cause really is the cause. If we were to apply this maybe to our code, the simplest thing that I can think of is actually to take full advantage of your unit tests. So we often think about, hey, this test goes and sees that the thing works when it's supposed to. Most of the unit tests that I find people write do this, and that's very important, but oftentimes people miss out the second part, which is also very important. And that is, things shouldn't work when they actually shouldn't work. So what we're talking about here is, again, we're talking about a positive confirmation and a negative confirmation. So we're not just checking to see that the happy path is working, but also it's not working when it's not supposed to. We're respecting the correct boundaries of the thing that we're busy looking at. So if we take a step back again, how does this apply to the idea of knowing the things that you know, and how do you know them? This helps us to create knowledge. It helps us to verify the knowledge that we have. I am able to now say with confidence, hey, I've got supporting information that backs this up. So that's the first technique. The second technique that I think is really important is a cute way of putting it, to follow the white rabbit. Maybe those of you who recognize this pop culture reference. This really is about digging deep into the subject matter that you're looking at. And it's about going further than what's on the surface, that you can see what's presented to you. And one practical technique that I can think of that really embodies this style of thinking, those of you who are familiar with Kaizen or have done some kind of studies in operations management might be familiar with what are called Ishikawa or fishbone diagrams. These are typically used in terms of a process improvement to try and find the causes of different problems. So we've got an observation on the right, and what we've got on the left is a real truth, but the little stacking of the lines shows us that we actually needed to dig deeper. This is also a graphical representation of a phrase also familiar to people with, who know about Kaizen, is that you're supposed to do 5 whys. So when somebody says, hey, why don't I have the right tool in my toolbox? It's like, oh, because Bob forgot to put it there. Well, why did Bob forget to put it there? No, because Bob was, you know, not around at the time. Well, why wasn't Bob around? Well, why? Bob was at lunch. So you keep on asking questions until you get to something that is deeper that you can actually change to fix something. If we were to now apply this to the idea of knowledge, it means we need to start peeling back all the layers, specifically in the case of code. We want to peel back the layers and say, okay, well, this is the property I want. Okay, well, it's actually put there, say, by your DB mapping. Okay, well, how does it put it there? Okay, well, in here, it's supposed to get it from this DB column. Okay, well, why is that DB column coming up wrong? Interestingly enough, just yesterday, I had an exact case of this come up. A colleague of mine and I were busy trying to figure out why we were getting some strange events coming up in our system. And it turned out that at some point along the road, someone had changed one of the settings in the test database that makes it different from the way it's supposed to be. So the only way to find that is to sort of start digging deeper and deeper and asking yourself, why is this not the way it is? And also asking questions, well, how could it be different? What could cause it to be different? So yeah, if we come back to that, that's really the idea of following the right rabbit. We want to drill down into the scenario or the problem in front of us and basically dig down to bedrock, or maybe as other people might like to tell it, go all the way down to the bottom turtle. And that will give us the knowledge of what has actually broken at the deepest level. So, or I can know for sure that something is right from the deepest level, because things as they might appear to us could easily actually be wrong. Right, so coming to a brief summary. So how could you know what you know? So the first tool is we want to create and verify knowledge with experimentation. So this is the idea of positive and negative verification of knowledge that we have. And the second tool is to go and follow that white rabbit. So we want to trace a problem end to end. We want to go and verify the actual state underneath. So we don't really want to draw on our assumptions or inferences based on other things that we know. So we want to follow that chain of knowledge all the way through. And that brings us to the conclusion of maybe how you know what you know. Great.
Right. Thanks so much, Jeff. That was very interesting. So I wanted to run through a couple of the chat comments that came through and maybe just give you a little bit of insight and also ask on those. So initially, when we were running through this, it came up from Brian to say that it links to him to the concept of deferred decision making. The longer you can safely delay a decision, the more you know you actually make that decision in a better way. So he also mentions that it's particularly applicable to systems building. Is this something that you resonate with?
Yes, I would say I resonate with that very strongly. Absolutely, from a design decision, I completely agree. The longer you can delay a decision, the better. So part of this also involves creating that awareness of, okay, well, actually, I don't know exactly what is going on here. So creating that awareness of what we know. So if I were to come back to this slide, this is particularly the concept that resonates strongly with me. So creating this conscious awareness of the things I know and where I know them from, that will help me to make better decisions in my design. And the more time I give myself, the more time I give myself to expand my knowledge. And to figure out, hey, where these things that I supposedly know actually come from.
Awesome. And how would you use that potentially in a discussion with a client? So when you guys are busy fleshing out a concept, how would you apply this in that space?
A very common phrase here is, we don't know what we don't know. So obviously this is the whole thing of people often start out as ignorantly ignorant. So like, I don't know about the things I don't know. And then you start realizing like, hey, now I know that I don't know these things. But yeah, so that's probably, in terms of a client engagement, one of the simplest ways to do it is to point out that actually there are a lot of things that we don't know here. So sometimes you can have an idea that there are a lot of things I don't know specifically here. So that could be like, you know, this is a really old program or application, or that's a really big database, and I just don't know all of the things that are important around that yet.
Absolutely. And I see Gilad has also asked us a question, and the question is that, was there ever a point in your career where you were confident that you knew something, but a colleague challenged you and you later discovered that your initial assumptions were wrong?
I can't think of any specific examples offhand, although I can almost guarantee that that has been the case. I'm pretty sure there's been more than one occasion where I've been really certain, like, I'm pretty sure I know this to be true, and later, you know, it gets demonstrated to me like, hey, actually that's wrong. So yeah, I think to me this highlights also an importance of, you know, as important as it is to develop this deep confidence about the things you know and how you know them. You also don't really want to let that get to your head. You want to perpetually keep your mind open to new information, which will either invalidate things you know. So for example, if you know that I know this thing because of that thing, and then somebody shows you that that thing is wrong, then obviously you can immediately infer other things that you now maybe are have the wrong idea about.
Absolutely. And how would you keep your team actually in the loop in this space? So if you guys were building a project, you're working through this, how would you challenge these assumptions so that everybody's actually on the same page?
Well, I think probably some of the more useful things to do here are part of your planning process should really involve the entire team, so that at least everyone has the opportunity to see a wide view of different ideas and concepts going around. I think the idea of making sure that everyone in your team knows that they can bring stuff up with you and discuss it. You know, I think to me, maybe coming back to the last question, you know, a little bit of humility about the fact that, like, actually you might be wrong about something. I have definitely learned things from people more junior to me. So creating that kind of environment makes you a lot more approachable to people. I suppose the next one is making sure that everyone in the team has access to any artifacts about information. So showing people, okay, you can go and find this there. A specific example of this that comes to mind is while I was working on a project that used Chef as a tool to maintain the state of various servers, empowering people to show them, okay, well, you know, you can actually find out what this little piece of information means if you go and you look here, and you can trace it through the whole stack to answer the question yourself. Yeah, I hope that's I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everyone, if you have further questions, please feel free to also put them in the question section. We will go through them as well. And then just one final piece of, or sort of final question from myself, Jeff. When you are solving a problem with a team member, would you mind walking us through your process of elimination, so to speak? So when someone approaches you with a really complicated system question, I mean, this probably happens a fair bit in a project like the Life Healthcare project, where it's as gargantuan as it is. So how would you sort of go through that step?
yeah, this happens all the time. It actually uses up most of my time at the moment. So for me, it's quite important to actually rather help the person find the source of the problem rather than to tell them as such. That said, it is also a collaborative process. So during lockdown, one of the things that's been quite fascinating is obviously via a screen share over Teams, you've got quite a limited control that you can actually exert over other people. So people will give me a call, like, help me with this problem. And I will try to take them through it and tell them, okay, let's look at this thing, let's look at that thing. Okay, hang on, where is that thing coming from? Show me the definition of this. So I think if we cast our mind back to these Ishikawa diagrams, let me just bring it up here. So this is the process that I'm following in my mind. I've got sort of this map, and in mind, and help clarify with them that all the details that we've got there are in fact correct. So yeah, it's quite a cooperative process, usually looking at code, looking at data, and stepping through the program also in our own heads, running a piece of code to verify, like, okay, that seems to make sense, that is what it is. You know, poke at variable values inside the debugger, make sure they're what we expected them to be. Yeah, also sometimes you can't do that, so let's add some logging. That answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, everyone. So I think if there are no further questions, what we're going to do is we are going to close off a little bit early to accommodate everybody who will be load shed in the next couple of minutes. So we will be hosting this for the next 5 minutes or so if you've got questions. Otherwise, I see Wayne's also left us a really interesting article to go and read on an agile primer and just-in-time decision making. So be sure to check that out. Otherwise, when you leave this event, you will also notice that a small survey will pop up, and please, I'd ask you guys to just fill it in for us. It basically will give us a lot of information on your experience and how you found this. Thank you for spending your lunch with us and for hanging out. Thank you so much, Julian and Jeff, for your amazing, amazing presentations. It's been nothing short of a delight. We're going to still be hanging out for the next couple of minutes if there's a last question, but otherwise, thank you so much. And we will see you guys very soon for the next one. Keep well. Goodbye for now.